Hey guys, and welcome to the first video competitive tier list update. I'm hoping to do this every time I make a major update, or maybe even a minor update, which hopefully I won't ever make. But yeah, this is basically just I did write out change notes, but they're very basic and they don't give you any reasons. So my hope is to give you reasons in this video, because writing them out would take fucking forever, and I don't want to have to do that. Don't want carpal tunnel, I'm sorry. But I also, something I did besides just moving stuff around, getting rid of stuff and adding stuff, is up here is I changed the way I looked at it. Tier 1 mechs are now the ones that are just gods. There's the ones that you'll bring to completely unrestricted matches, and they're the ones that you'll see every time in leagues like Arhad, where you can take whatever you want as long as it's like, you know, in the game and not for C-bills. And so obviously that's basically just clan mechs in the Griffin. Tier 2 is the ones where you'll see in restricted matches like MRBC and Merrick Civil War. These are the ones that are like, these are also mainly going to be inner sphere mechs, because like they're just not as good as the clans, but they're still more numerous, so you're gonna have to put them somewhere, basically. I think that this is a pretty good way of looking at it, because these are like, they're the second string of mechs, basically, and that's what Tier 2 is all about. In Tier 3, I've eliminated a lot of mechs from the tier list. The only one that remains huge is the short range one, because just so much shit is viable at short range play. But Tier 3 is now stuff, basically, that just, if you're doing something weird, if you're doing something crazy, or if you're doing something that's just a little bit subpar but not all that subpar, then that's basically what Tier 3 is about. I did go through and remove a lot of kind of irrelevant mech builds. For example, I got rid of the Gauss K2 in favor of the Gauss Jaeger, because I think the Gauss Jaeger is just better at the role. So that it obsoletes the K2 basically, and so I dropped the K2. There's a lot of changes like that, and we'll go over those as they come up. Alright, so now let's start with the change notes. First of all, I did a simple change of making the Gauss Jaeger DD instead of S, because the DD has a range quirk, which is going to be more valuable in the normal ranges that you engage with those super long range builds, as opposed to the velocity quirk on the S. I also moved the Dragon Slayer and the Cataphract 3D down from Tier 2 to Tier 3, because they're really not suitable for those really long range engagements, not anymore. They can be used at those ranges, and some people do, but they're not that good at it, so there's really no reason to, and you can use better mechs. I've also, like I said earlier, removed the K2 for the Double D, and I've also, in the same vein, removed the Battlemaster 1D with 4ER large lasers, because there's no point in taking it over the Stalker 3F with 4ER large lasers. And now into the medium range stuff. I moved the Dragon 1N to Tier 3. I just felt like, even though it's got that really good AC5 quirk, it's the hard point is just so far to the right and so far away from your cockpit, and the convergence isn't great, that I couldn't have it in Tier 2. I didn't think it was good enough. Its only real use is going to be in medium range engagements where like it's completely open field, and in that case, like, there's just better mechs to take. And along the same lines as the Novas, I moved to Tier 3 because they're just too fragile to be doing anything really. And so yeah, definitely not Tier 2 worthy anymore. I also dropped the Jaeger-Mech S with the AC5s and AC2s in favor of the Double D with the UX. Felt the Double D was doing the same exact thing, but it was doing it better. And I removed the Wolverine 6R because I think that it was just a slightly worse version of the Dragon 1N. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And now we can go on to short range. First of all, I added the Grey Death. It's the new Shadowhawk hero. I put it into Tier 3 because its playstyle is not what we're looking at these days. I'll show you the build real quick. It's basically just like the Shadowhawk 2D plus a medium laser. Another way you could run it is with 4 medium pulse lasers and 2 SRM4s, which does look kind of attractive, but like there's just other mechs that do that sort of thing better too, so I didn't really feel the need to put that in there. I just think it's a solidly tier 3 mech. I modified the build on the Orion VA and the Sparky. We can open both of those up now. First of all, on the Orion VA, I dropped the Artemis in favor of regular SRM4s, ferrofibrous, and a much larger engine. Now that it's going like 74 kph, I can actually get in range to hurt enemies. And on the Sparky, the old build was medium pulse lasers. I swapped that out for 5 mediums and a large pulse. Basically looking at the same firepower, but longer range, and takes better advantage of the quirks too. So I just felt like that was the best move there. And our next changes is all movements based. First of all, Victor 9S to tier 2. I just don't feel like it's shaping up as a tier 1 brawler. If you are pushing on an enemy contingent of like medium range inner sphere mechs, then the 9S is the way to go. 9S is tier 1 at that. But in situations where we're talking about things like dire wolves, where we're talking about atlases that it's got to fight against, it is coming up a little short, and so I don't think it's worth being tier 1 anymore. I also moved the Hunchback 4G to tier 3, even though it's got an amazing AC-20 and those right torso quirks. I don't think it's as good as taking SRM brawlers. And I moved the Nova to tier 3 as well, because if it's too fragile to be in a medium range engagement, imagine how fragile it is in a short range engagement. Even though those 12 small lasers do put out 60 damage, which is pretty incredible, it's gonna die in like 20 seconds. You're gonna get 1 alpha out, and that's it. Well, 20 seconds is a bit long. I guess maybe 10 seconds and 2 alphas. Whatever. You can do the math. You can do the whatever. I don't even care. Moved to Air to tier 3. I think we might not ever see it again. It's just 45 tons is not that important of a thing anymore. Now that we got clan mechs like the Stormcrow, I'd rather just take one of those in a light mech. I moved the Banshee 3M to tier 3 as well. I think that other mechs do the same thing but better. I think maybe even the Boar's Head does the same thing but better, and so I might be dropping the Banshee 3M out entirely. Sorry, Pie Maker. But I am leaving it in there now because in really restricted drops like in Merrick Civil War and No Ballistics, it is a monster because it can just wreck shit so fast. But outside of that, other stuff wrecks shit faster. And so I also moved the Catapult K2 up to tier 2. This is the AC-40. I think it's an underrated mech, and I think that when it's paired up with something like an Orion VA, which is obviously going to be tanking not a lot of damage, but a decent amount of damage, or if it's paired up with Atlases, it can get away with putting out a lot of damage and being ignored, but in favor of those larger threats. And I also moved the Shadowhawk 2K down to tier 3. It's pretty much the worst SRM brawler on the list at the moment, and I didn't think it was good enough to compete with stuff like the Ludiger or any of the other SRM brawlers. I also removed a bunch of mechs. The Shadowhawk 2D was dropped just because it's a worse version of the Grey Death, basically. I dropped the CN9A because it is not the best 50-tonner. Ludiger is the best 50-tonner at brawling. I removed the Jaeger Mech S in favor of the Catapult K2 because the K2 does the AC-40 better. That's the build they were both running. And I removed the Trebuchet 7K because it had the AC-20 2 Meads, which is the same thing on the 4G, but the 4G just does it so much better. I also just straight up dropped the Boar's Head and the St. Ives Blues because I didn't think they were shaping up. I thought that, like, I didn't really see any reason ever to take them in competitive. Like, Boar's Head, I'd rather take a real brawler like an Atlas S or DDC, or even a Banshee would probably outdo it at its own role, like with an AC-20 a bunch of medium lasers like the 3S, which is also not on here because it's not a great variant either. And also the St. Ives Blues, I think I would always rather have a Blackjack than a Vindicator. And finally onto lights. Basically all I did was swap the position of the FS9A and the Ember, because they both serve similar roles, not the same one, but like they're both all about getting really close and tearing the enemy up. And the Firestarter A is really doing that a lot better with the small pulse lasers than the Ember is. So that's the story behind that, and that's the story behind the tier list in general. Sorry about that, you got to see my source code. Alright, well that's it, and thanks for watching. I did the same thing over on the IS variants tier list update, so if you want to check that out, by all means. And yeah, GLHF.